Hey guys, welcome to Herding Little Cows to the Glory of God. I'm Sarah.
I'm Mark.
And we have a total of 10 kids, 2 of them being out of the house, so 8 kids at home. So our oldest is 28, down to a newborn who's here.
Who's hiding right down there.
We have a 2-year-old here sleeping in the bedroom. And our daughter is about to have her first baby. So we're very excited about that. But so first I'm going to do a disclaimer. So I know lots of people watch our videos, and we have a lot of videos that like have our kids in them and all of that stuff. This video is not for little kids. So if you're watching this video with little kids in the room,
Now's the time to
shut it off. And so I'll explain why to shut it off. We're going to do a video. I had someone ask me a question about women's bodies after childbearing and the intimacy between a husband and wife. And so we're going to discuss that topic a little bit. So again, if you don't want your little ones watching this video, turn it off here. We're not going to get too explicit in anything, but if you don't want them to ask questions about why we said something, you might want to turn it off.
Yes,
so,
this is our first video that probably has a parental advisory.
Yes.
No, I think we've had one before, but
so please don't do them regularly in the comments and say that you weren't expecting whatever we're saying in this video. And just to let you know, we don't really know exactly what we're saying in this video. This question came up just a few minutes ago.
We've talked a little bit.
Talked for maybe
5
10 minutes.
10 minutes. Yep.
And so we'll see what comes out of our mouths.
We have talked about these things
before, yes.
Before for many years, but as far as someone asking a question so that we would actually provide them with a response, this is new territory for us on video.
Right. So, yeah. So where do we want to start?
I would just say that our channel is everything about like doing life to the glory of God. Our goal in life is to glorify God, to enjoy Him forever, as the Catechism rightly states. And we know that there's a lot of practical ways that people talk about as far as saving money and grocery shopping and where to find good deals on clothing for your children.
And those are all great things.
And a billion things. And we do videos like that as well. But we also know that we're much more open than many people and willing to admit our challenges and our struggles. And because we know other people are hurting, other people are having challenges. So this topic, I think, is important to a lot of people. So we want to be able to help if we can.
So I think we should start off with when we first got together. Our oldest son is from a previous marriage for Mark.
Right.
And Mark had multiple partners. Let's leave it at that.
Yep.
I had a few short-term boyfriend, more like, hey, let's go to the movies together type thing. Never a serious relationship before Mark, but I also was sexually assaulted before I met Mark. So
really your intimacy experience was always tainted.
Yes,
was always negative. Yeah.
Not from anything from my parents. I just didn't really learn much. Not really a positive or negative view on anything there. And Mark learned a lot. Like I learned a lot from public school and friends from public school. So that was my experiences.
I lived a much more deeply sinful lifestyle. And I won't get into the details of that, but know that when we talk about these things, we've seen a lot. We've experienced a lot. And the only reason we're sharing it is because we think it will be helpful to others. So that's our goal. Yeah,
and another aspect that kind of plays into all of this is the rampant sin within the churches of pornography and sexual sin, affairs, those types of things. But specifically in this conversation, the just pornography aspect of, I don't know the numbers on that, but it is outlandish numbers of how many men are involved.
I have seen numbers about men in ministry, pastors, elders, deacons, Sunday school teachers, youth ministers. I have spoken to many men over the years who have confided in me things that I'm not sharing here, but just know that if you think you're safe because your kids go to Christian school or go to youth group at a really good conservative church, or I really know this family really well, or any of these things, sin happens in the hearts of many people, and sometimes it comes out into outward manifestation, and they actually do harm to other people or sin outwardly. So we're talking about matters of the heart. We're talking about matters of affecting others. I need you to take it from here.
Okay. So we were asked a question today about a woman going through childbirth and therefore leaving her in a different state than her body was in before childbirth happened. And this person, I do not personally know. They reached out to me because of videos and Facebook stuff that we've made before. And so I'm not speaking, like, if you were the one who wrote me this and you're watching, I'm not speaking specifically to your situation. It just made us think of these things. So when we first got married, Mark had a lot more experience than I did. And I kind of just did what I thought was expected. I didn't come in with any knowledge. And so when we first were intimate, for the first while of being intimate, whatever, I just kind of went along because I felt like he had more knowledge than I did.
Right.
I guess is the way to say it. So we were sinful and we have repented of this, but we were active before we got married. And then we went on to get pregnant with Virginia shortly after we got married. I was on birth control. We got pregnant, had a baby.
Yep. She was born 11 months after our wedding. So
yeah.
Yep.
So then after her, we went on some more birth control and had a miscarriage about 3 years later, and then went on to have Naomi. And after Naomi, we left our fertility up to God. The next child we had was Joshua, which he was stillborn. And after he was born, I was really trying to make good memories with the kids. And I think my intentions were good, but what it did to my body wreaked havoc on my body because I was trying to push myself really hard. There's going to be tears in this video, just so you know. If you don't want tears, go away now. It wreaked havoc on my body because I was trying to push to do things for the kids. Naomi was about to turn 2, like her birthday was 2 days after we lost him. So my mom had flown out to be with us. And I, like, this wasn't anyone else forcing me, I decided, let's go to the beach with the kids. And so when you have a new baby, God has designed it that as mom, you're sitting down and nursing the baby a lot. And when you don't have that baby to do that, you tend to move around too much and do too many things. And a little too much information here, but after we had done those things for a few days, I ended up having a prolapse. I was not treated medically for it, as there was some malpractice stuff that caused the death of Joshua, and I wasn't ready to walk back into a hospital at that point. So I don't know, like, there's different kinds of prolapses you can have. You can have bladder prolapse, uterine prolapse, those types of things. I don't know what organ was prolapsed. I do know that it was a large prolapse. Like, there's different degrees of prolapse. I don't know exactly what degree it was, but it was something that was easily felt from the outside and was definitely something that changed how I felt about my body personally. And I didn't do anything specifically to try to help that prolapse, but after that happened, Joshua had died from group B strep, and my body got really, really sick from that. And so I was forced to lay low for a couple weeks because my body was so sick. So I think that helped me recover from the prolapse, but I wasn't doing something specific. So when people ask me how I helped that, I didn't help it at all. God laid me out.
You were forced into bed rest, basically.
But because of that, because of the injury that I saw from trying to do too much after baby, that's why I am very active in trying to get moms to take the rest after baby. specifically, like if you can get 6 weeks, but specifically the first 2 or 3 weeks, lifting nothing heavier than your newborn, not being up making meals for your family, doing all paper goods. The first 2 or 3 weeks, just taking care of your newborn's needs, like your newborn and your needs. Like I'm getting up so I can take a shower, not I'm getting up so I can shower the other children.
Right.
Like take care of yourself. And I think that's very important, especially if you're just going to leave your fertility up to God and say, God, when you're ready, I'll be ready for another baby, means you need to take care of your body to do that. So in all of that, we have experience with things looking rough from the outside.
Yes.
So one thing I want to discuss is that the Bible tells us that a husband is supposed to be physically attractive.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
Okay.
yes, we'll get to that.
I don't know which direction we're going. I'm sorry. We have multiple points here.
Physically attractive to his wife. Like it talks about like the wife of your youth. It talks about, if you read Song of Solomon, there's a lot of physical aspects there. So those are all good things.
Yeah.
So, and I think that men are very much more physically intrigued by their wives than a wife is to her husband.
Yes.
On a normal basis.
Again, our culture has changed a lot in just the past 15, 20 plus years of our marriage.
Yeah.
In that you hear a lot more from women about sexual attractiveness, physical attractiveness, that kind of thing of men. Not just cute and things like that, but things that are much more complex. Man, it's really hard to keep a train of thought today. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Just the idea that a man is supposed to want his wife, and that is an okay thing.
Yeah.
But
I shouldn't want somebody else's wife. I shouldn't want somebody who's not my wife, but I should want to be intimate with my wife. Like, that is who God has made to be my lifelong partner.
Right.
In those things, and the only one to which I'm supposed to think those thoughts or have those feelings. Like, yes, there's a hypersexualized culture in which people can dress more provocatively, but it has much more to do, I think, about the heart of a man and how he looks at the world around him. Are you disgusted by someone who's parading themselves around trying to look sexually attractive? Are you intrigued by it and have to avoid the temptation? Do you just avoid it altogether? There's multiple camps in that.
Yeah.
Just 1 second. I'm gonna make sure that's plugged in. Sorry. Okay, hold on.
But also, the idea that if a husband and wife are close spiritually, emotionally, physically, and just like we actually like closeness to each other, not intimate, like not sexual intimacy at this point, just the fact of being one and wanting to make that relationship deeper and deeper on a regular basis.
We're both pursuing the same goals. We're doing different roles, but we're both pursuing the same goals. We're both wanting to be with each other. Like, we enjoy just sitting and talking. We enjoy going for walks. We enjoy holding hands. We enjoy all of those things.
And the more you do those things, the more attracted you should be to your spouse. Not just in a physical way, but like, I want to be with this person. So not
this
necessarily.
person encourages me. This person builds me up. This
Right.
person, and that should be a two-way street. Gentlemen, you know who you are. Your wife is probably watching this video. You should pay attention.
So the part of this reason we're doing this video together is I didn't want this video to come across as I'm a wife telling other wives what you should expect of your husbands.
Right,
That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to talk through this relationship between a man and a wife. And this is I would encourage you in this video to stop it and have a conversation about things that we're talking about. Hey, I agree with this. No, I don't agree with this. Like, if you don't agree with us, that's fine. I hope this opens a conversation, though, between couples to be able to talk about these things.
Because a lot of people never talk about them.
Right. So one way to be more physically attracted to your spouse is to actually just spend time with them, to actually want to grow closer to them, grow closer to God with them. And it's going to make you closer as a couple in those ways. But I never see a point in the Bible where a woman is going to look the same. Her body's going to be the same from the time she's a teenager through the time that she dies.
Nope.
And I think that's what's expected in culture. There's a lot of women dieting really early on because they want to get back to pre-pregnancy weight. There's a lot of this, oh, I'm not as strong as I was before. I'm not strong in certain ways, but I'm strong enough to take care of my family. And I think that's important. I think it's important that you keep your health well enough that you can take care of your family. But I don't think it's wise to spend all of your time trying to make sure that your body looks right.
A certain way, yeah.
That can become an idol. And I think that very much in our culture is an idol of I don't look like I did when I was 15. And I will tell you, when Mark and I met, I was a very different size and shape than I am now. I got pregnant with my first baby. I put on weight all over the place. And when I delivered her and went back down in weight, my body had different curves than it did before and all of that.
Totally.
I think there's a big difference between what your teenage body was and what your womanly body is. I'm not saying it's wrong if a woman's body naturally goes back to that state. I'm not saying that. I'm saying if you're striving.
If that's your pursuit, your only pursuit in life is to make sure I look good enough for my husband. If your husband doesn't think you look good enough for him, there's something wrong with your husband. Like, I married a woman. I didn't marry her body. I didn't marry her assets, so to speak. I married a person with a heart, with a soul, who is made in the image of God, who I have made a lifelong vow to love, honor, and cherish. And that includes intimacy and marriage. And if anything, like, she's not the only one who's changed physically over the years. I'm heavier than I was when we met. I certainly have a lot more physical and mental processing capabilities. Like,
There's more gray here.
There's more gray. Isn't it looking good? I haven't trimmed it down in a while, obviously. But like, I look different too. And every guy, I don't care who you are, you don't deliver babies and you don't nurse babies and stuff like that. But guys, you don't look like you did the day you married or met your wife. And that's okay too. You may still look that way when you're 40. What about 50 or 70, 85? Life changes, and that is okay. And we're not even talking about, in our case, where I have a physical condition that is deteriorating my body faster and my mind faster than is normal. I'm saying in the average family.
Yeah.
Like, we change over time. God made our bodies that way, and that's okay. And we need to stop acting like everything has to be like the commercials, or everything has to be Instagram worthy, or everything has to be Hollywood body crazed diet, drink this thing for 30 days and you lose 65 pounds. None of that sounds healthy. None of that, the goal itself is I want to look a certain way, even if I feel poorly. But, sorry.
That's okay.
Out in the weeds, because people spend a lot of time talking about, oh, I don't find my wife attractive anymore. Well, that's your problem, not hers.
So I feel like I will say that most of our videos, I try very hard to not be talking about specific people in mind when I make the videos. But in this video, I have specific people in mind. I don't even know if those people watch my video, so I'm not doing it because I'm like, hey, you behind the camera. But I have specific instances in mind of things that we've heard about. And there are a lot more men who expect their wife to keep a certain appearance.
Perhaps even pressure or manipulate your wife to maintain that appearance.
Even though that man is much different than he was when they got married. Like, much different. And I think that it's not fair for a woman who is bringing children into the world and giving of her body for the entire 9 months she's pregnant, and then forever, however long afterwards that she's breastfeeding, and getting her body ready for a possible another pregnancy, for the husband to expect more of her than he expects of himself.
Totally.
I think that's a totally unfair.
Yeah.
Because I know most women that I'm thinking of also have a certain degree of lack of sleep that the husband isn't dealing with in nursing those babies for however long, the lack of sleep you have during pregnancy, all the minerals that your body uses to grow that baby inside and then feed that baby on the outside. Your body, mom, is doing an incredible amount of work, and God is amazing that he allows us to do that. But to think that your body is going to be the exact same beforehand afterwards as it was beforehand is crazy.
Yeah.
So then we also have the idea of the emotional aspect that goes with intimacy. So we've had this discussion recently.
Yes.
Men.
Very eye-opening at times for both of us, I think.
So both of us have skewed views of sexual intimacy. We explained that at the start of the video. But I think on average, and you can comment about this if you want, but I think on average, men are more physically, like sex is more of a physical thing for them.
It is a very physical thing.
I think for women, there's a very emotional aspect. And yes, there's physical, and I'm not saying women don't enjoy and all of that stuff, but I'm saying there's a much more emotional, I need to be okay emotionally and emotionally between the two of us, or I'm not even thinking in the direction of intimacy because emotional is intimacy.
Because sexual intimacy is to be born out of a relationship that honors God and that is actually mutually beneficial. So I'm just going to say this because I'm a guy. So I had friends in high school, friends before we were married, things like that, when I was a kind of a testosterone raging young man.
And not a Christian.
Where you would be angry with somebody. Somebody would do something you didn't like, maybe even, I'm thinking of an instance in which a guy like started dating the girl that I had been dating and like stole my girlfriend kind of thing. We met, we argued, we fought physically. And then
you and the guy?
Yeah, me and the guy. And then we got over it. Like, some punches were thrown. Things happened. People got physically hurt. And then it was over with. And then, guys, that's kind of how we roll, is we get angry about something. We vent our frustration by punching a wall or punching a person or screaming or yelling or whatever it is.
And then you're like,
I'm not saying any of those things are good. I'm just saying that is the natural, sinful course of a man's action. But even though we may get angry about something, we tend to get over it
real quick,
very quickly. So if we had some sort of discussion where we had a misunderstanding or we were upset with one another, and then we talked about it for 5 minutes, I'd be like, so we're good, right? So, I'm
going to keep replaying that conversation in my head. Sure. And we actually discussed this last night, that there are things that Mark said to me 20 years ago at the start of our marriage that I still have in mind for when I'm making decisions about things.
Chronic memory loss is handy at times for people like me.
And it wasn't anything like, this had nothing to do with intimacy last night. It was just like, I remember things and I play back conversations and how could I have done differently, and are we really in the right place? I don't know, I need to ask this person. Like, all of those things happen. I think that is how a woman's mind works. And again, you can comment below because maybe we're totally off on this, but I think that
this is a conversation starter. I
think a man, and this is a conversation, this is the part to pause this and go talk to your spouse. Again, we're hoping this is opening conversations for people. A man, you can be having a day with your spouse that is not going the right way and everything seems crazy, and at the end of the day the husband's gonna be like, okay, you ready?
Or even, I've been at work for 14 hours physically taxing my body and I'm exhausted and I'm stressed and that kind of thing, and I come in the door just in time for go to bed and I'm like,
Where a woman needs to know that her emotional needs are met before she's ready to think that way. And
this isn't
and
just...
I'm not saying a woman never initiates. I want to add that too.
Yeah, but this isn't just our speculation. Like, the Bible actually tells us, husbands, dwell with your wives in an understanding way. Understanding, she talks about a weaker vessel. I don't think it's talking about women are weak and women are easily deceived. That's not what I'm talking about here. What I'm saying is the need that God made in men is a set of needs, and there are needs and there are wants. There are desires in there. Sex, by the way, is absolutely not a need. Jesus never had sex. As far as we know, Paul never had sex. So that whole idea that men need, baloney. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 7, because of sexual immorality, you ought to have a wife. Well, if you're not having those sexually immoral thoughts that lead to sexually immoral actions, then, but that's not a need. That
But
is,
he says it's
because
better.
there is something there, it is better to marry and have a good, godly, productive outlet for that sexual desire than to just burn within yourself of something that you cannot fulfill. So that being said, it's not a need. Like, there are many people that we know personally or have read books about or have listened to testimonies on that physically are incapable of that. They still have very good marriages. Mm-hmm. You can have an exceptionally good marriage even if you are physically incapable of sex entirely.
Right.
So that being the case. Where was I going?
I don't know. We were talking about women being emotional.
Men need, no you don't.
And you were talking.
You need to grow up. Like, if your wife just had a baby last week, you need to grow up. Okay? I've said this to men to their faces before. I'll say it to the camera now. If your wife delivered a baby vaginally last week.
Even if she has C-section. Either way.
Yeah, I
however the
don't
baby
really
came
care.
out.
Or 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago, or 4 weeks ago. You get the point. That is not a need for you. That is a desire. It is a good and godly desire. And in its proper time, it will be fulfilled. But if I had a sexual desire in the middle of church, I'm not supposed to leave church to go do that. There's a time and a place for things that's appropriate and inappropriate. And when your wife is sick in bed is not the time to be looking for some. Okay?
And just for men who don't, because I know there's some men that don't know all the intricacies of childbirth and just leave all of that stuff up to their wife.
Could we pause for a second? Grow up, men. Educate yourselves. Like, read a book, watch a video, be at your children's. Like, I personally delivered a couple of babies. Been there at the delivery of all of the, sorry, caught. I didn't do that. Yeah, anyway, that's her thing. But I was there, visibly present, like throughout all of labor and all of the pain and all of the can't find a comfortable position and I need help with this. And wow, we feel like this should be going faster and all of the emotional stuff while you're waiting for your baby and all of that. And you know what? Grow up and realize what your wife physically has been through and emotionally has been through. Like, labor and delivery is a lot of work physically, but it's also a lot of work mentally and emotionally. Mm-hmm. And it's a beautiful thing. It's a great thing. But that's not the time to be thinking those thoughts. Like, it is not a need that has to be fulfilled at this time in this way. It's a desire. It's a godly desire within marriage. Great, fine.
And so remember all the work your wife just did. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of soreness and stuff that goes on with that. Mm-hmm. But there's also a time that her body needs to physically heal because there is a large wound inside her from where the placenta is detached. This doesn't matter how your baby was born. There's a large wound.
If you've ever seen a placenta, like, you're talking dinner plate sized, gaping, bleeding wound internally. If you had something like that, you'd be crying and going to the hospital and looking for painkillers and all this kind of stuff. This is what happens every time a woman delivers a baby. Every time. And
so there's the healing that needs to happen. The healing that needs to happen without introduction of infection, which would happen if you're doing things beforehand. And just the time that a woman needs for the bonding with her baby to not be trying to fulfill a desire of an adult who can take care of themselves. If that makes sense. And I'm not putting a woman's breastfeeding
is also not a terribly appropriate time to be thinking those things. Grow up, guys.
So I'm not going to put a time limit on it because from a perspective of modern science, once you're not bleeding and all of that stuff, you're okay to do those things. Some people go by the biblical 40 days, which is about 6 weeks, which is what they say. And then it would be 80 days for a female. I don't know why the difference. I'm not putting a time limit on. I'm just saying that a woman who's dealing with all of the emotions and hormones and pain and all of the stuff that goes with just delivering a baby. And this is, we're talking just a healthy baby. Yeah. Like if you have a baby in the NICU or something, these things are going to be like 100 times worse for the woman. So a woman dealing with all of those things should not have to feel the pressure of her husband saying, well, what about me? What about me? You're not thinking about me. Think about me a little more.
Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. That's what the Bible tells us to do. It says the Bible commands us to dwell with our wives in an understanding way. The Bible commands lots of things of men that we are very likely in the flesh to break, which is why the command was there, because sinful people desire to do things that are not expedient.
And so,
You're not adorable. You're so cute.
a man thinking more about himself than the needs of his wife and the needs of his new baby is being selfish. I'm just going to say it that way.
We're not saying nothing. Like, we're not at all saying, like, don't touch one another in any way, shape, or form. We're not saying, okay, you get a month and a half and your wife doesn't talk to you, sleep in a separate bed. We're not even saying anything like that.
We're just saying the husband should not be pressuring the wife. Wife,
Right.
give of yourself as you feel you are capable of in a way that is pleasing to the Lord.
Yeah, don't use your body as a weapon to manipulate your husband, and don't have, revengeful thoughts and those sorts of things. But in a good and godly Christian marriage, you shouldn't have that stuff going on anyway. I should be saying, I need to love my wife as Christ loved the church, and she says, and I need to submit to my husband as unto the Lord. So I shouldn't be, just like I shouldn't say to you, I'm expecting something of you that you can't do. Like, I would like for you to go get a job and make $100,000 a year. You can't do that. You have many other responsibilities. Recognizing, yes, I have responsibilities, she has responsibilities. But I don't know how to say it either. Maybe there's manipulation that happens on both sides. And I think in this, what we're talking about today, like post-birth, letting your wife heal, letting your baby grow attached, that kind of thing. Exercise self-control. One of the good and godly traits that is talked about in 1 Timothy, Titus, self-control. Like, that is a fruit of the Spirit. It is a fruit of the Spirit of God. It's not naturally attained. It's not a fleshly thing. It's self-control. To say, I have desires, I have wants. My wife is having a bad day. She's injured. Her ankle hurts. Whatever it is, come up, or she's healing in various ways. To say, I'm not going to pursue the thing that I would like because I love my wife and I want to make sure she's okay. Because I'm supposed to protect you. I'm supposed to honor you. I'm supposed to respect you and love you. Yes, I know it talks about the love and respect thing. As a human being, as someone made in the image of God, not as an asset that I can tap into whenever I feel that I need to. I don't know how to say that
And
well.
also,
we're going to do a lot of blathering in here because I have a hard time keeping a train of thought, but I still think this is important.
so I want Mark to go with this because I know we've talked about this before, but also women, you are not responsible for your husband's sin.
Nope.
So if you are, like, I'm not saying to withhold from your husband if it's a good and godly time to be intimate, but we have heard from both men and women that if a man sins, whether it's looking at pornography or going and having an affair or whatever it is.
I'm going to say committing adultery. Having an affair isn't a thing. Affairs
Okay.
are just, I had a party, I had a function, I had a thing. An affair is a euphemism for adultery, which Jesus condemns expressly.
And looking at pornography.
Looking with lust is adultery, according to Jesus.
Right. So we've heard both men and women say that if a husband sins, it's his wife's fault because she is not providing for him. And so I just want to say that if today I decide that I am no longer going to be sexually intimate with Mark, he does not have the right to go do it with somebody else.
Nope. Or look at pornography, or
That would
have
be
lustful
wrong of
thoughts,
me, and
or-
I would have sinfulness on me for, you're supposed to be available for your husband. Like,
But the recourse
Whatever
isn't
says
go
that.
sin some more. Okay,
Right.
she sinned against me, so I'll sin against her. That's not marriage. That's not Christian. That's not godly.
so if a wife is doing what she needs to do for herself and she is willing to be there for her husband when it is appropriate, then she is not doing anything that is causing her husband to sin. He's
Right.
committing the sin.
Right. I think there's a lot of ways in which we tend to blame our sin on other people.
Yeah.
And it's so easy in a culture to excuse our sin also. Like you say, there's pornography, but then there's just turning on the television and people are oftentimes inappropriately dressed. Or when you go to Walmart, or you don't have to go to the beach these days. You can just walk down the street and you're going to see somebody who's probably dressed in such a way as it could be sexually provocative if you were looking and continued to look. If you notice something, look away.
Seeing the temptation is not the sin.
Yeah.
It's what you do with it once you see there's a temptation.
Jesus was tempted in every way, yet without sin. So I know he's God, so I'm not saying we can perfectly do this, but he is our example. Christ is our example to walk in his steps in every way.
And it says in the Bible that there will always be a way of escape.
Yes.
So
yeah, that whole verse that says, God will never give you anything you can't handle. It doesn't say that. It actually says, no temptation has overcome you except is common to every man, and he will provide a way of escape. That way of escape may mean, like Joseph in Potiphar's wife, to literally run away even if she's ripping your clothes off physically. It may be all sorts of things, but it is my responsibility if someone makes a pass at me to walk away from that person and avoid them. It is my responsibility that if someone is inappropriately dressed, whether it's at Walmart or at church or at the beach or wherever you might go or on the TV, to look the other way. And if I have lustful thoughts, to ask God to keep me from that sin, repent of that sin. At times I may even need to tell my wife about that sin if there's someone who's coming around or something that we interact with commonly that I find is a temptation that she might not know about because she might be provoked in a different way, to keep myself free from sin. That is a biblical obligation for every Christian, that if something is sinful, you avoid it.
And this has to, it doesn't play into sexual intimacy necessarily, but this has to do with social media. There are a lot of people who are very inappropriate on their social media accounts in whatever way. And if the social media account is causing you to have sinful thoughts, even if it's, oh, but this was a friend from high school, it doesn't matter. If when you see their page, you're thinking thoughts you should not be thinking, unfollow that person. You have that button right there.
You can unfollow the person, you can hide the post. The other things you can do on social media, you can actually go into your media settings and not preload pictures or videos or auto start videos. There's all sorts of tools for people who don't want these things.
You know what's the other thing you can do?
Shut the stupid
Get
thing
rid of
off.
social media. Now, we're telling you this on YouTube, so we're not saying you have to go to social
We're
media.
not saying these things are bad. We're saying if they cause you to sin, it would be better to pluck your eye out or shut off Facebook.
If I know that I'm going to overeat Oreos, I should not buy Oreos and keep them in the house. And I should have a plan for if I'm offered Oreos somewhere, how I'm going to control myself.
Yeah, I'll take 2, thanks. That's what I've chosen as a limit for myself, and people will honor and respect
Right.
that. They're not going to try to tempt you with more. Well, maybe some people will, but they shouldn't.
Right. But the idea is we all have temptations to something. And sometimes because of our temptation, we need to say, nope. Like people with alcohol. The Bible says alcohol is okay. Jesus made wine.
Be not drunk with wine, which is excess.
But if somebody's like, you know what, for myself, I find it's not appropriate for me to use alcohol, I'm not going to be like, oh, just take a drink. Just have a little bit. It's
No, we
okay.
have many friends who believe that it would be sinful to touch it or know that they have struggled with addiction in the past and so choose to avoid it. Okay. I'm certainly not...
Okay, so back to the sexual
certainly not
intimacy
gonna offer that stuff.
thing.
Yes.
Sorry, just had to get off on that little tangent.
Carrying on.
So it's not the wife's fault if the husband sins. So now we need to get into the aspect of the actual having the baby and what it does for the wife's body. Pregnancy is a lot on your body, and you're going to feel different as a woman. You now have gained a bunch of weight. You have weight in different places. You're dealing with things like varicose veins and things that just are unpleasant.
Well, in the early days, bleeding.
Yeah. I'm talking about like pregnancy itself.
Oh, pregnancy, sorry.
Even in pregnancy, your boobs get bigger. There's possibly like hemorrhoids and things like that. Like there are not nice things that happen to your body in pregnancy. And as a woman, to be selfless, to be sacrificial, and to give your body over for God to do that, like to give you a child and have you go through pregnancy is a beautiful, wonderful thing. But there are aspects of it that are not so much fun. Throwing up every day the first trimester is not fun. But to be able to be part of pregnancy is just amazing. So I'm not trying to...
Bringing a new person into the world. Look at this person. He's an amazing person.
I'm not trying to make pregnancy sound awful, but there are hard aspects of it. Just like if you're training for a marathon, there are hard aspects of it, and being able to finish that marathon makes you feel incredible. But we can't say like, oh, marathons are just wonderful. No, there's the sore muscles that go with it. There's maybe the falls that go with it. There's the extra food your body needs to eat. There's things that are uncomfortable. And so there are things in pregnancy that are uncomfortable. And so a woman during pregnancy is already going to have possible self-image issues because of pregnancy, and feel like my body's changing and I don't understand. I don't like it. I don't understand it. Not like, oh, I hate my body. Not that. Just the idea of I can't control what's going on right now. Then the actual delivery part, well, this happens in pregnancy too, but then also the delivery. You're dealing with people being in your space that you don't want to be in your space, but medically necessary sometimes.
Midwives, doctors, people like that are in your space.
So like during pregnancy, there's times that tests have to be done or checks need to be done or whatever. And I'm a person who's limited on those, but there are times that it has to be done. And that can feel intrusive and that emotional state that women need to be in to feel ready for sexual intimacy can be tainted for a little while with that. I'm not saying forever, but like if she has an appointment that day, she might not feel up to doing anything that night because somebody else is in her space and she's just not okay right now. And I think that's a fine time for a wife to say, I'm not ready for this right now.
Well, like you say, varicose veins and things like that, or I don't know, being pregnant in the summer can be rather uncomfortable.
Yeah, all the chafing in your thighs.
Can cause major skin disruptions that the man may not be experiencing, but they affect the woman.
Yeah.
And one needs to be understanding.
Also, like, I'm not going to get into this, but there are times in pregnancy where it is not safe for a woman to be sexually intimate, whether she's having problems with an incompetent cervix or maybe an infection of some type. So a husband has to be understanding of that time too. But anyway, the actual delivery part, there's people in your space that you don't want to be there. There's a lot of pain that goes with birth, and birth is incredible. I would go through birth tomorrow. Birth is awesome, but it is intense and painful, and I'm very open about that. I would tell you, even if there wasn't infection and stuff, like if it was just the pushing the baby out part, I didn't have to worry about the, placenta hole and all of that stuff. I still would not feel like sexual intimacy for a couple weeks because everything down there is sore and it's just uncomfortable. Like, it's uncomfortable to use the bathroom. So don't you think it's going to be uncomfortable to do other things? Just saying. I mean, it's hard. It's uncomfortable to get out of bed. So I don't want to do other stuff right now. And that's without the infection possibilities and things like that.
And the thing is, on the other end, you know what? You've understood many times before when I had a herniated disc in my back many times now. Multiples at a time at times. And my neck. There are times when I physically can't move without severe pain. Like, I just cannot function at all. And then there's some people that struggle with, I would like to perform but can't. I don't have that problem, but many people do. Then there's the, for a woman, it's I look differently or I feel differently, so I don't know if this is okay. But there are men who struggle with, I'm unable to perform for whatever reason. Should the man be shamed for that? Like, I don't know anybody who's like, let's shame men for being unable to perform. But on the women's side is very much an expectation. And I feel like intimacy was given as a gift from God. For pleasure, for intimacy, for procreation. There's a lot of good and godly things about it. But like I say, it's not time when you're walking through Walmart to feel spicy, or at church, or at work.
God will always make a way of escape. That front door of Walmart.
Get your work done, bud.
So anyway, the actual delivery part, there's a lot of people talk about birth trauma, and I think the word trauma is thrown around too much. But birth is a very intimate, intense experience, and things can easily, even if something wrong didn't happen, in the mind of somebody who's super invested in the moment, and you're dealing with the pain and you're dealing with the emotions and all of that, things can seem way bigger than they are. So I think something that wouldn't look like trauma to a person not experiencing it in birth could feel like trauma because you're in such an intense place at the time. And so there's that aspect. The woman needs to be able to heal in her mind from anything that happened there that wasn't okay. I don't really know how to explain all the ins and outs of that, but I think if you've experienced it, you know what I'm talking about. Because you can, like, let's say you're somebody who went through labor and your body didn't like dilate all the way and you ended up having a C-section. There's that kind of idea that you feel your body's betrayed you. And I feel like God's given us C-sections for great purposes, and I don't want anyone to feel bad watching this video that I'm trying to say something bad about birth. I'm saying a woman who goes through something, who it doesn't happen exactly as she's looking for it to happen.
You have a plan in your mind. Your plan when you're pregnant generally is, I'm going to have this baby and I'm going to have a natural delivery and hopefully I won't need a lot of intervention.
Right.
You have that thought process, and then you have a car accident and you need a C-section, or like you say, you'll only dilate to 5 centimeters and that baby's not coming out.
Or baby's heart rate's dropping and they need to throw, put you in for a C-section. All of those things do something emotionally to the woman. And again, because emotions are such a big part of the sexual intimacy, she needs to work through those things. And her husband can help her by listening or providing a way for her to talk to somebody who can help her. If the husband, like, I think it's good for a woman to talk to her husband too.
Totally.
But maybe talking to the pastor's wife or talking to another friend who is going to be supportive of her, making that time for her to be able to do that. And I'm not saying women should run away from their spouses all the time and stuff. I'm just saying making sure that emotionally a woman is feeling like she's healed from that. Because there's a lot there. And then after you have a baby, things are just different. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm not saying anything like that. But for some women, they notice a difference down there than before they had the baby. And even if there's not something that's actually physically different, they feel different in just the idea of, from never having a baby to having a baby, I'm a totally different person. Like, I wasn't before I got pregnant, I was not a mother.
Right.
Now my body has been given up for motherhood in a good way. And like, I feel it's the godly way that, God asks us to bear children and all of that. But I feel like you're now a new person who needs to understand who you are. And you're going to feel different in the relationship aspect also. And so women need to be able to deal with that. And probably Mark's sitting here going, but physically nothing feels different.
Yep.
But for
no
a woman,
perceived difference from my vantage point.
But for a woman, things do feel different. And through history, there's been these ideas to try to make things pleasurable for the man afterwards. And so there's something that used to be done called a husband stitch, that if a woman needs to be stitched up, the doctor does it just a little extra tight for the man to have pleasure later, which actually makes things so painful for the woman.
Women.
I've never had one. I've just read about this, but like makes it super painful for the woman. And then I've always had super easy deliveries, but there are women who have, they have really bad tears and things like that, which will make things harder for even longer. And a husband has to be understanding that your wife was willing, again, to sacrifice her body for this baby. And things might not be the same afterwards. And to then be like, well, you need to, do things for me because I expect it, when she really has laid down her own personal comfort for your child.
Yeah. Was there more you want to say about that?
No, you can go.
No, I was just thinking about the aspect that we mentioned previously, and I know there's a really good book written about sexual assault and how that affects people. There's a lot of trauma that happens, like you talked about before. Sometimes it's a camp counselor, sometimes it's some trusted person in your family or circle of friends, and someone hurts someone.
A teacher.
A teacher.
A church person.
We know all sorts of documented cases and cases in our own lives where various people who should have been trustworthy betrayed a trust and harmed someone to various lengths, sometimes manipulating them, sometimes touching them, sometimes doing horrific things to them. That doesn't just go away because you fall in love and decide to get married.
Right.
For people who have endured what you may think is a very minor thing. I remember when the book came out, there was it was just a little minor thing, right? Minor things affect people greatly, affect people deeply, and in ways that you probably don't comprehend unless you've walked through it. And you probably don't even understand biblical healing from it unless you've walked through with someone who knows the Word of God very well and applies it biblically in a purpose of showing good and godly ways to overcome that which is traumatic, brought to you traumatically. I don't know how to say that any better. So just know that people who have been sexually assaulted in various ways may not like, I'll give you a dumb example. When I was a kid, we got a dog, and we got a dog from somebody who it seemed the dog had been abused, and the dog was fine almost all of the time. And I was like 13, 14 years old, and I'd been raking blueberries, and I bought myself a black cowboy hat. And the dog was fine every single day of its entire life until I put that hat on my head. And when I put that hat on my head, the dog that I had at that point for probably months, maybe even years, would bark and snarl at me and run away from me and cower and all of that because I was wearing a certain hat. Now, women are not dogs. This is not a one-to-one correlation, but I'm saying you don't know the inner hurt that people deal with, the emotional trauma, the thoughts that go through their heads. And that's why this book was written, to help people that have endured those kinds of things. Like you said, these things affect you. And so a lot of times people think, oh, you're going to get married, and then, when the baby will, you'll be pregnant the first night. Well, some people don't even have sex the first night. Some people barely touch one another the first night because they've endured so much trauma that they would love to be intimate, but don't even know how. And it brings up in them sometimes horrible feelings and thoughts and memories. And a man, if it's his wife that was in that case, would have to be very understanding, very patient, very prayerful, very open and honest to say, this is a desire of mine. I love you. I find you attractive. I want to be with you. But I also understand that you've been through a lot. And I'm not, if someone says this word or whispers in my ear or touches me in this way, and I'll avoid doing that for your sake so that I don't do that. Like,
Okay.
This is not a sexual thing, but it's in here. When we were first married, like when I was a kid, if somebody said something, like my brothers and I were messing around with something and I said something they didn't like, they put their hand over my mouth. Not over my nose, just over my mouth to tell me to shut up. I did that to her once. Maybe more than once, I don't know. I don't remember things.
And it wasn't done in meanness at all.
Just kind of like, oh, shut up, like that. She has, her sinus cavity is formed wrong. So a lot of times people say she sounds out of breath and she's breathing through her mouth. She always breathes through her mouth. She cannot breathe through her nose.
I could have surgery to fix this whole thing, but I've been breathing this long, so.
Right. So to her, covering her mouth is just like covering her mouth and nose, and would be terrifying to feel that I cannot breathe. Now, I'm an asthmatic. I know what it's like to not breathe, but I had no idea that someone doing this to your mouth would make you feel like you couldn't breathe until she told me. And so my insensitivity and my it wasn't a sinful behavior to do that because it wasn't hurting anybody in that context. But when you experience that, you have felt terror. You might have remembered experiences that you couldn't breathe, things like that, or people that had done something to you, and that just doesn't go away by saying, oh, that was in the past, you can trust me now, get over it. It just doesn't heal overnight. There may be healing in time, but I think even now, if I were to do something like that, you'd probably still have a hard time because you still can't breathe through your nose.
And so as a husband, try to be careful. I mean, as the spouse, try to be careful if your spouse has told you something that please don't do this action during intimacy, but also be understanding if in the midst of intimacy, the spouse says, can we do something different? Because sometimes there are deep hidden things that you don't even know are there, especially if you're someone who has dealt with abuse and you feel like you've told people something and then something new brings it up, or it just happens to be a flashback. You can't always be prepared for those things. And maybe even something that's been okay during intimacy up until now is suddenly not feeling okay. You want both people to be in a place where there's enjoyment going on. You don't want to do something. There's a hummingbird out there. You don't want to do something that causes your spouse to be worried next time.
Because you can actually traumatize your spouse by doing something that isn't sinful, or isn't hateful, or whatever, but to them, they experience it as a terrifying experience.
Yeah.
I use the nose thing because most people don't have that kind of a problem.
Right.
Just like most people have never been stuffed in the trunk of a car or whatever it is, or locked up, or all sorts of things that happen to people. And it's very hard to admit these things. Like, it's very hard when you're thinking, oh, I love this person, I want to get married, to be like, so I kind of need to tell you something bad that happened to me because it's probably going to affect our wedding night and how we're together. And like, can we avoid this? Or like, they're very hard conversations to have. So like, we are not a YouTube channel that sits around talking about sex all the time. We don't talk much about intimacy at all. But we do talk about Christian marriage, how a husband should love his wife as Christ loved the church, how a wife should submit herself to her husband, and how a husband shouldn't make that difficult by making unreasonable expectations of her, or ungodly expectations of her, or just insensitive expectations. There's extremes on both sides of this in manipulation and withholding and all of that stuff. But that's not what we're talking about.
Talking about just normal.
We're saying I'm saying to the husband, if you love your wife, listen to her, understand what's going on with her, and like I can't cover her mouth. It's not hurting me a bit. I don't have to do that. There was no reason to have to do that. To dwell with your wife in an understanding way. It's like that verse keeps coming back to my mind because I'm so apt to not that I'm like, oh, I know this bothers Sarah, I'm going to do it anyway. Rather, it's, I didn't even remember that was a problem. Or, you told me what had happened to you, but I didn't know how deeply it affected you. Being open and honest communication in your marriage, and then raising children, preparing them for marriage, you have to walk through some stuff that is rather challenging to deal with. And so our channel is walking through day-to-day life in marriage, in health, in sickness, in poverty, in plenty, in having children, in losing children. Like, because we lost Joshua, he died at birth.
And then we had a couple miscarriages.
And we've had miscarriages that we, expecting babies. One time we even went to the ultrasound with all of the children in the room to see how the baby, how big the baby was and all of that. And the baby had died. And that was traumatic, maybe even for our children. So maybe our children don't want to go to ultrasounds anymore.
Just an aspect people might not know about our family too is at one point we were foster to adopt family. And we ended up having 3 foster placements that we knew were not adopting.
Right.
Like the ones we had. That was it. But we did have one time where there was a baby born in the hospital. We went and got things for the baby. We had bottles and everything. And then we got the call that mom had decided to keep the baby, which is great. And I'm glad that's what you want in a foster situation. But just, we walked through the trauma of that too. Of like, okay, we're going to go pick up a baby. Nope, never mind. We're not picking up a baby.
I think we had told the kids we were picking up a baby.
Yeah.
Hey, we're bringing a baby home. We're going to go pick up this baby and this person's going to drop off this baby. And especially in foster care, that happened to us multiple times where someone said, yep, we're going to show up. We'll be there in about 2 hours to drop off some kids. Oh, guess what? Grandma decided she would take the kids. And then 3 days later, hey, guess what? Grandma can't handle the kids, so you're still taking them. Like all this kind of stuff that goes on in families every day because we live in a broken society, in a broken world, and knowing those things and thinking about it. So we've experienced a lot of that, and we've found biblical healing and biblical wisdom to share from them. So that's why we're here, to share our experiences in light of God's word so that we can encourage people who are walking through similar challenges.
So I have 2 more things to say about the intimacy thing. One, this was I just remembered a couple months ago maybe, Mark sent me a little Instagram reel, and it was just about a husband kind of pressuring his wife to perform that night. And she was like, no, not tonight, I have a headache, or whatever it was. And like legitimately, she wasn't just like trying to put him off. Like she legitimately had a reason that they weren't going to. And then the husband kind of being like, but please, please. And just the idea.
That's manipulation on the other side, guys.
Just the idea of pressuring your wife. There is, I don't know, at least for me, if I was feeling pressured in that way, I would be less wanting to just snuggle and do those things, because I would then be, okay, now I need to perform because I went some of the way. I need to perform the whole way.
Right.
And just that idea that it's okay to not want to do the whole thing and just be able to be close to your husband.
And you may have to say that just openly, like whatever period of, it's like, okay, so we're both kind of feeling froggy here. So
we were spicy before, now we're froggy.
Because I'm feeling this way, I don't believe that I'll be able to go here, but we could do this or this. And verbalize that so that the expectations are known and understood. And if it's me, you have to tell me at least 5-6 times.
Because I'll just say, there are things that I'm not going to get detailed here, but there are things that we do before we're fully together again after a baby that happens before I'm ready for that. But I say, hey, here's where we can't
do
go
this,
tonight.
but we could do this.
And I think that even goes for like, hey, I just had work done on my teeth. I can't kiss you right now because my mouth's sore, but we can sit here and snuggle, but we can't kiss. Like I think that's fair in this situation. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to say was just the idea of marriage being a picture of Christ and the church. And communion being a picture of Christ and the church and that type of thing. And the idea that I think it's okay that women are emotional regarding sexual intimacy, because in the idea of communion, Christ and the church, there's the idea of having a healthy, renewed relationship before you take communion.
Yeah.
And being able to be in a good place with each other, not just, I'm going to pop this bread in my mouth, I'm going to drink the juice, and hey, I did the thing. Yeah,
I don't want to talk about if anyone eats or drinks unworthily, exactly what that means. This is not a hermeneutical discussion.
No, just the idea, though, that the physical act of doing communion is not what God wants us to do.
Right. It's predicated on the heart condition and the attitude of worship and the remembrance of Christ and what he's done.
Right.
There's an emotional,
I don't know a better way to say it.
I don't know a better way to say it, yeah.
But like a way of needing the relationship to be right.
Yes.
To make communion actually be what it's supposed to be. And there's an aspect where it's okay for a woman to feel like things have to be emotionally right for sexual intimacy to be what God wants it to be. It's not meant to just be a physical act.
Right. In the same way that if you're fighting with your spouse on the way to church and then you walk in the door and just put on a big smile and act like everything's fine, it's not fine just because you acted like it was fine.
Right.
Like you may need to just step outside the first 5 or 10 minutes of the church service and go talk to your wife and make things right. Or my wife may need to speak to her husband and repent of something. Like it works both ways. It may even be with a child or somebody else in the church that you need to go make it right with. That God wants unpolluted worship. He wants hearts that are fully attuned to him and truly worshiping him. You can sing all the songs, you can read all the stuff, you can clap, you can amen, you can anything you want to do. That doesn't make it worship. The heart makes it worship. God desires our hearts, and I think that it's not a one-to-one, but I think it is reflected in, like you said, the relationship between a husband and wife, to have the open lines of communication, that they have a pure and undefiled relationship with one another, that they're walking in love one for another.
And in the same way that you shouldn't wait until it's time to take communion. Like, you know, how churches do the whole, okay, so now's a quiet time to examine your heart so you can make sure you're doing this right. Like, you shouldn't have to wait until that moment to make things right. And a wife and husband shouldn't wait until they're in bed that night to be like, okay, are we emotionally okay to do this?
Yeah, let's get this straightened out so we can have sex.
Like, that should be a wife should feel free to say, tonight's not the night because we need to work this out. Like, she should feel free to say that, but she shouldn't wait to talk about those things. These, just like with Christ, when you realize that there's a problem, you should try to fix it right then. And relationship should be the same way. A husband shouldn't be like, okay, I'm willing to sit down and talk to you as long as I can get what I want in the end.
Yeah.
But a wife should also not be holding out on telling her husband that she's having some issue, and using it kind of as a manipulation to not be prepared to do things.
Yeah, there's a ditch on both sides of the road.
Yeah.
There's almost always a ditch on both sides of the road.
So anyway, we would love for you guys to use this as a talking point with your spouse. So like I said, pause the video, talk about things, come back to the video. Also, let us know in the comments, like, if we said something that you want to talk about, that's fine. But if you just found this video to be an encouragement or good talking points or anything like that, just let us know that you watched it and that was encouragement. We want to know that, like, we took time away from the kids and stuff to make this video, and we just want to know if it's being, like, if it's helping anybody.
We believe that it will be helpful to marriages. We believe it will be helpful to people in their Christian walk.
Right.
To listen to these things and think about them and pray about them and talk about them in your marriage. We don't want to just make videos where we put a show on for the kids so that we can go entertain people on YouTube. We're not entertainers. We're Christians. We want to encourage people. We want to help them. We want to equip them. We don't know everything either. So, you know, if you've got some scripture to share with us that we haven't considered, drop it in the comments. Try not to be argumentative. There's always people that are argumentative, and there are other people that are helpful. And some people are trying to be helpful and sound argumentative, and we will try to be
gracious in our answers.
Discerning in which those are. Because we love even those viewers we don't know. Like, we love people because you're made in the image of God, and we're reflecting the image of God in marriage. Ultimately, in Christian marriage. But I still think these things would be profitable even for unbelievers.
Yeah. So just, if you watched it, you know,
but this
and
video
you
was
liked
made
it
for
or
Christians.
whatever, please just let us know that our time is worth doing this, because we have these conversations anyway between ourselves. We don't just have these on here.
Right.
And so we're taking time away from our family to be able to make these videos to be helpful to people. If you find them not helpful, let us know, because we want to make sure
we'd like to do something that is helpful.
Right. So yeah, that's what we have. So hopefully that was an encouragement, and we will see you guys next time on Herding Little Cows to the Glory of God.